process characterization, if they know that you have a comprehensive process characterization, that you know the boundaries in which you're going to get the product within the desired quantity, they will buy your science. So what they're looking for is science throughout. Understanding your product, making sure that you have a good foundation. Important for a biosimilar, but for us as CMC people, I think we have to focus on the process and analytical. So now I will talk about the critical quality attributes of biologics. Again, the same thing. Why are we looking at, why are biologics so complex? It's very clear. They are produced by living cells. What are the controls that we have? We have to manipulate the cells. We have to manipulate the environment in which they grow. We'll have to control the nutrients. So it's everything that you do outside and make the cells more happier. Finally, you're going to get a product that you really require, right? Which is not the case with a small molecule. You still have a lot more option or opportunity to work with a small molecule in the lab environment. Whereas here you just have to work with the cells. You have to keep the cells more happy and make sure that they deliver the product for you. It's an indirect way. Also, the product is very complex. It's like when you're moving from a cycle to an aeroplane, right? You're looking at an aspirin and an antibody. This is the kind of difference that you're looking at. So you have to define your specifications accordingly. I mean, your target is to make an aeroplane. You can't end up somewhere in between. So looking at the complexity, antibody is definitely much more challenging and complex. It has quite a lot of amino acids, 1,300 amino acids to 1,500. It's a challenge altogether. And those amino acids, all those amino acids can get modified. So this is how the ICH defines CQA. It's a physical, chemical, biological or microbiological property or characteristic that should be within an appropriate range, limit or distribution to ensure that the desired product quality. What does this mean for us? Define the properties of your product. Those are your quality attributes. And then shortlist your CQAs, those attributes that need to be monitored, that need to be controlled. And finally, if you do a good monitoring and control of your CQAs, you're going to get a product that will be consistent. So this is, in short, what is expected when you're defining your CQAs and what CQAs are about. What are the quality attributes? How do you define quality attributes for a biologic product, right? There are different levels. First one is, it could be process related. We are talking about cells here, right? So they have their own set of impurities. I mean, they will have the host cell protein, you will have host cell DNA, you will have media components, a lot of upstream related impurities. Then you have, because they are cells, you can have viruses, you can have microbial contaminants, which are also safety related. So these are mandatory. You don't need to think too much about them. There are regulations that guide you and tell you what you need to do about them. Just follow the guidelines. Then you have the drug product properties, right? You have to make sure that you're delivering the product consistently in a while. You have to maintain the pH, you have to maintain the protein concentration. If it's a lyophilized product, you have to look at the moisture content. All the properties or characteristics that go into the product in a while. Okay? Chemical structure is similar. There can be some amount of variation, but it's a very tricky area if you go into going to have a amino acid sequence that is not identical to your reference product. So primary structure or the higher order structure like the secondary, tertiary structure and all that, as well as the functional attributes, these are key to your product development. We have very little leverage around them. Whereas with the product variants, you still have some leverage, which I will cover in the next few slides. So this is map structure for us in a very simplified form. You have the biological properties, Fab associated or FC associated. I'm assuming that most of you know what I'm talking about, but please feel free to stop me if you need some. Because we focus so much on the Fab function, we look at the potency, we look at the binding, we look at all the other the CDR related properties. But the glycan and the effector function play a very important role, and that's what the agency really looks for. They look for the complementing binding with whether you have a similar ADCC all the FC functions. So you have the FC gamma R1, R2, R3 and the associated R1A, R2A, all that. You need to develop a range of assays for covering and ensuring that you have a similar product as the innovator with the functional assays. Physicochemical. I mean, this is a range of attributes that we have here. Starting with the amino acid modifications that we all know about, deamidation, oxidation, glycation, isomerization. So these generally are, evaluated by the IEX or the charge-based techniques, most of the amino acid modifications, but you also have specific oxidation or glycation tools to assess them. You have fragmentation, which can be caused due to the cleavage. You have the disulfide break here, or you may lose one of the light chain, you get a 2H1L kind of fragments. There are other ways of fragmentations like protease-based fragmentation, which are more difficult to deal. Hopefully you don't have any protease-based fragmentation. The other most important attribute is the oligosaccharides. You need to ensure that your fucosylation, silation. First, you have to ensure that you have a similar glycan profile, right? This is actually kind of the most toughest because downstream has very little role to play here, whereas in case you have a deamidation or you have a fragmentation, then you have certain tools in the downstream process that can take care of it, that you can control. But glycosylation is an attribute that the downstream team or the purification team will have no control. They are going to have very, very minimal role to play in this. So everything happens upstream. So it's like a continuous process, right? You get a feedback from whether your glycan profile is similar or not, and then you go and manipulate the upstream, which is a tedious process. It's not a simple process. Every cell culture run or every cell culture output is going to take you 20 to 25 days. So that means it takes a month to get an experiment completed, and that's the other reason why this is quite challenging. So the oligosaccharides include the total afucosylation, total acylation or silation, total galactosylation, because each of these individually play a role either in the clearance or in the stability or in some aspect of the antibody, including the effector function. Then the free thiols, the disulfide shuffling, which in a way shows that we have a similar secondary and tertiary structure. The N-terminal and the C-terminal heterogeneity. So you have pyroglutamate formation, or you can have a lysine processing here, which we all agree about. This is one attribute, for example, which we really bother about quite a lot, the C-terminal lysines. But unless you have a product which is a sub-Q, we shouldn't be focusing too much on the C-terminal lysine variants. The reason is, even if you have differences, which are bound to happen because your cell culture, the amount of CPB it produces versus what the innovator has, can be different, so you end up with a lysine variant content which is going to be different. So unless you have a product which is going to go into sub-Q, if you're going to have an IV product, you don't need to bother so much about it. These are like easier to justify, the C-terminal lysine. This is a quick example. And finally, all the primary and the secondary structure and aggregation. So this is like a snapshot. What I would call about is like you're literally creating an Aadhaar card for your antibody versus the Aadhaar card of the innovator. So this is the crux of your characterization.
Jyoti, I had a question.
Yes.
Is it okay to ask question now? How will you or now or later?
I'm okay.
Okay, so I have this very nice comprehensive list of all the characterization you do. But general question is there a recommendation or from the experience that you've got, does the number of copies in a cell matter? Like we can have a number of copies ranging from 10 copies to 200 copies. So is it the more number of copies, the more variability you see? Is that like that? Or is there an optimal range of copies that we should target?
You're talking about gene copy index.
Gene copy number in the cell.
I think some of the later generation cell lines would have higher gene copy index.
Yeah.
But the earlier molecules that we worked on had lower, right? I mean between 5 to 10 versus whatever the newer copy.
Yeah.
I don't know whether the variability is going to increase as long as the monoclonality of the cell is proven. It shouldn't matter how many number of copies you have.
Okay.
If you have and also the consistency of the process. So if you are able to prove that you're going to consistently manufacture the process, no matter how many gene copies you have in the clone, as long as you're able to show consistently you're able to deliver, I think that shouldn't be a problem. But again, this is my thought process. I have not read anything about it.
Yeah, no one has done the systematic analysis like that.
But it
You
will
know
be-
of, right? Okay.
Comprehensive list. But whatever I am aware of, there are no new state-of-art techniques that are available in the last couple of years that even Biocon is working on. But this list is a previous one. So for the primary structure, these are some of the things you could do. You could look at the intact mass, you could look at the heavy chain and the light chain mass, the amino acid sequence and the NM terminals, which tells you in a nutshell that you have a primary structure. These are the characterization techniques that you can use. That is the LCA. I mean, most of it is mass spec based. And I think you're going to cover this very heavily in your coursework. The higher order structure, which is a secondary and tertiary structure, again you have a list of orthogonal tools. It is important to have not just one tool to prove that you have the same secondary and tertiary structure, because not one tool really covers all the aspects. The FDA looks for orthogonality here, not just the FDA, all the agencies like EMA and a lot of the agencies would look for orthogonal tools to prove the same point, that you have the same like the secondary and tertiary structure. So you can see the far UVCD, near UVCD, non-reducing PMF, free cysteine, NMR, FTIR. All of these tools just give you a picture or snapshot telling that your quaternary to the primary structure is the same. Glycosylation, as I already told you, the list of glycosylation, starting with the N-glycan occupancy, is it at the same location, the N297 or whatever aspergin residue is supposed to be, do you have it at the same occupancy, is the occupancy the same, do you have the same profile? What is the level of afucosylation? This is very critical for the potency, the afucosylation content, sialic acid for the clearance, galactosylated, etc. And you have NPHPLC and RPHPLC tools to assay this. Coming critically as one of the critical quality attributes, I have further slides covering on how to assess the criticality of any attribute. For charge variants, you have the IEX HPLC, you have ICE. For fragments, you have CESDS and hydrophobic variants also. This is a list of the bioassay tools, but again, this is, I would say this is a comprehensive tool. There must be more. You have to look at the FcRn, you have to look at the Fc gamma receptor like FcRn1A, R2A, because each of these have a role to play if the molecule has an ADCC. Yeah, that's what is important. So for example, if a molecule does not have ADCC, bevacizumab for example, you may not need so much. If you are working on trastuzumab, you need to look at all of this because you are having two mechanisms of action. You have the ADCC and then you have the IOP. So if you are working on a molecule which does not have an FC effector function, you don't need to put so much efforts. A representative image of some of them. I mean, you're going to see more of this during your course. I've not given many details here. This is again the glycan. I mean, this is actually from our trastuzumab data. That all of this is from the trastuzumab slide deck that was presented to the agency. This is an IEX HPLC profile. You have the deamidation, mostly here deamidational fragments, which come as acidic variants, and the basic variants you have oxidation, you have isomerization and all. It is also expected for some of those techniques that you use, especially for example the charge variants. This is just a profile. You don't know what is lying underneath, right? So it is expected that you collect each of these variants, do a characterization and show that whatever is there in your product versus what is there in the innovator. So you can take vials of the innovator, take your vials and collect all of these variants and do a characterization on them, showing that the identity of the variants, product variants that are there in these areas for both your product and the innovator product are the same. This is a clear expectation, and there is a lot of questions around this because it is not possible that you will have a very similar profile. The profiles are difficult to match, especially because you're talking about deamidation at different sites. The media will influence the deamidation. The fragmentations are not going to be similar. It may not be the exact identical. You could also have different sites, for example. But as long as it doesn't have any clinical effect, I think it's going to be acceptable.
You have
Yes.
a question.
So when we characterize at what level you say it is okay. So as you said, if you have deamidation, you can have at different sites. And at one peak may represent multiple sites coming together because it's just charge based. So how do you represent or what level do we need to characterize?
How do you represent what level?
Like when you say it is a multiple peaks of deamidation,
Yes.
it's possible that you may have multiple species. And you will have to do at the peptide level, do we have to characterize
No,
and
you have to go
quantify
beyond
or?
that. You have to go beyond that. You have to. So each of these variants, as you can see, even the smaller ones here, this and this, you collect them individually and show that you do not have a new peak. If you have a new modification, you have to show that it still has a potency. If you are unfortunate and if that particular peak doesn't have a potency, then you have to end up showing that it is not immunogenic, even though it's a new modification, it's not going to have a safety impact and all that, right? So you have to collect each of these peaks, run them through the entire array of tests, including the functional potency, and show that it is similar.
So assume that one of the main peak is deamidated, but the deamidation can be at the multiple place and then
So
they
the
may
quantity
be
can be
able
different. The quantity. So for example, if you have a deamination in say, I don't recollect the name, but if you have deamination at a certain position in the innovator and around the same position in your product, say the innovator is 5% and you have 12%. As long as you show that there is no compromise to the overall efficacy because of this difference, it is fine. You are not having a new peak there. The challenge will be when you have a new peak. It is not that you will not find new peaks, it will be that you will find new peaks also. But there the challenge is a little different. I mean, it's more challenging because then you have to show that this is not going to impact the immunogenicity. It's not going to have a safety impact of any sort. You can add to it, I will say that. I mean, if you end up with a new peak, the proving that it's not immunogenic or it does not have a safety impact is going to change.
It's a new product development actually.
Yes. But we have situations where we have seen.
So actually, I have missed a point. So are you saying that we have to enrich enough to test all the tests which is
Absolutely.
done? Okay. So
And
which
it's
means
crazy
that
doing that because you take 4 months just enriching the small little peak to a purity of say more than 60 to 70%,
right.
and producing enough quantity to do a bioassay which will say require say 1 milligram, but a peptide map which will say require 10 milligram, and they will miss the sample, then you have to go back to the lab and purify it all over again. So it
So
is
just one quick note on that. So in your experience, so did you come across with any of the deamidation which does not have any immunogenicity whatsoever? So is that such things which you encountered
I
in the
won't
past?
say deamination will have immunogenicity because naturally it is present in our system also. I mean, deamination is not the risk factor. It is isomerization or
Say for
some
example,
other
oxidation.
modifications.
Okay.
Isomerization, for example, is something that is more unwanted or considered as an impurity. Not so much of deamination or fragmentation. That may have, if it is in the CDR, for example, deamination, it can impact your potency. But the challenge to immunogenicity of the deamination is going to be much less. It's more the other variants like isomerization or even glycation in certain products can be considered, Amanat, am I right? Is going to be considered more difficult, not deamination.
Ma'am, I have one.
Maybe I should just complete the slide. It's just 2 more slides. So, what are critical quality attributes? This is something that I've been saying right from the beginning. What is the relevance of the attribute to the clinical outcome? How does it impact efficacy, safety, PK, and immunogenicity? There's a way you can do it. I mean, you have to rank the critical attributes. There's a nice study done by AMAP case study which gives you all the details that you want. This is how you do it. I mean, you look at the potential impact of the clinical outcome. Does it impact safety, efficacy, immunogenicity, or PK? You have to present this risk ranking also, how you have done this risk ranking to the agency. What about the uncertainty associated? Do you know for sure that it does not have an impact, or you think that it may not, or there is very little information? So both of these together will end up in giving a risk ranking. So this is based on literature understanding from clinical exposure, which is very minimal because clinical publishing data, I mean the innovator is not going to publish data saying this impurity has this clinical relevance, right? But then you look at generic, how does it, like for example, aggregates, you know can impact immunogenicity. So that's the data you use. So prior knowledge from similar class molecules, fundamental understanding of the biology, and all of this is where what you use to determine the criticality. This is an example of a criticality score. So you end up with a criticality continuum. It's not that you say this is critical, this is non-critical. You end up with something which looks like this, which if you have both the impact and uncertainty very high, obviously it is going to be critical. Or if you have the no impact, then it is understood that it is low criticality. So what you end up is with a continuum of criticality that looks like this. This is again from our own trastuzumab experience. Amino acid sequence, for example, has a very high criticality. It's understood that the primary sequence has to be similar. Functional activity, that is the binding, potency, ADCC, you do not have room to play around. It is very high critical. And here the agency was at that point of time looking for an equivalence. Today there is some change in the way they are looking at it. They are also, I guess, with data getting a more moderate approach. But for these attributes, they were looking for equivalence testing. Whereas if you look at the high or moderate or low, depending on where the attribute is, like for example, for a glycation or methionine oxidation, a 3SD or a 2SD, again based on the method. Suppose if you have a method which is highly sensitive, then you can have a wider range. But if your method brings in a variability of itself, right? For example, CASDS, we all know that CASDS has a very high variability, right? So with a 20%, 15 to 20% variability of the method itself, you cannot afford to have a 3SD because then that really brings you a very wide range. So here, depending on the method of the method sensitivity, you are allowed to have the ranges. And that's, yeah. So this is the list of tests or the orthogonal methods that were used. This is the FDA presenter. So there is a very interesting thing that happened during the ODAC. You submit your dossier and the FDA summarizes that information for their presentation during the ODAC. And it is in their own version, which is very nice to look at because you have submitted your information and it's very nice to see how you feel really proud. The FDA talking on your behalf to the panel of people sitting out there and telling these are the tests that were used and everything. At the end of it, this was a slide which said that this is a highly similar molecule. And there were some differences. For example, we had a difference in the total sialic acid, in the non-glycosylated, in the charge and hydrophobic variants. There were differences, but it was explained by the agency that these differences do not cause a clinical impact. Okay, I'm going to end saying that it's actually possible to completely characterize a molecule or decode a complex biologic in the laboratory. A lot of people have experience doing it, and I think we should reach out to each other more and see how we can share the knowledge. Thank you. With that, I will end my slide. The environment was very good with Naren also leading the efforts when we were doing this. The leadership team was very good. This is Biocon Research Center, and so many of these things were possible only because everything was conducive, right from the management to the teamwork. It was a huge teamwork that made this happen. Thank you. Take questions.
In the interest of time, we'll just take one question.
What are the IPQC parameters while manufacturing of
IPQC parameters.
in process quality control?
So it depends on what process you have, right? And some of the mandatory requirements are you need to do the endotoxin, the bioburden, you need to look through the process. And the others are depending on what you want. So as I told you already, process-related parameters are something you want to make sure that you're checking through, right? Where are you clearing HCP? Where are you clearing your HCDNA? Which is the step that is critical for clearing those process. So those you should have defined upfront. Then if you are having a clearance step, for example, the HMW, right? If you have say 3 steps in your process, you should define the step that is designed to clear the HMWP for the final specification. Let me clarify this. So for example, you have an FPP, then you have negatives, then you have generally a polishing step which you can get, right? So define your IPQC for the HMWP at the step which clears. Don't put it at the other 2 steps. Don't put it at the affinity, don't put it at the AEX, which do not clear that impurity. Because what happens is you end up unnecessarily loading the system, and the data is only useful in the development, which you can even generate in the lab or the pilot scale. So setting a specification when you are taking it to the manufacturing try to see, look at the steps where you're doing your actual projects. Is that right?
Now, thank you so much, ma'am.
I'm still here, so maybe I can take some questions.
Okay, sure. So I request Prajakta ma'am to give a token of gratitude to Jyoti ma'am.
Thank you.